Hello and welcome to the year 2001 of Nintendo Power Magazine Checklist from Dr. Gakman here. I'm your host, Dr. Gakman. This is my own personal collection of Nintendo Power magazines that I go through for a checklist for all the items that are in the magazine. Now, there's a lot of changes that happened in the year 2001, and we'll talk about changes as I go through the video. And you'll notice there's been aesthetic changes. There was changes to the company, Nintendo itself, and changes to how they did some things. But like I said, we'll go over that as we go through volume by volume. So we're starting with January 2001, which is a Spider-Man cover. Now the subscribers got a special wraparound cover, which was nothing super special about it. It was kind of eye-catching a little bit. The inner cover is what was on the newsstand, which was, again, Spider-Man, but it was like Spider-Man himself instead of that black and red wraparound. Now, on the inside of the wraparound on the front cover, it has Stan Lee signed in. He says, "Welcome, Spidey fans. I hope you're primed for action and raring to go." It's just a little thing that they did. Now, you'll notice around this time in history and with Nintendo, they were trying to get more PlayStation-esque franchises over to, and sadly, like Spider-Man, the first big games were the ones that were on Nintendo platforms, but for the 3D era of Spider-Man games, when they started going into 3D from 2D, it started off on PlayStation, and it was from the same publisher, Activision, that did Tony Hawk. So they were already established with 3D, and that Tony Hawk, you'll see that coming up too. That was a PlayStation first franchise, and then eventually it ended up going to Nintendo 64, and then later on other Nintendo platforms like Game Boy Advance and Gamecube. So there's the front cover. The centerfold, and this is a 2-for-1 right here. You got the centerfold up here, which is Warriors of Might and Magic. This was a 3DO game that was on Game Boy Advance, or no, Game Boy Color. And then the second part of the 2-for-1 is Imagination. Now, for whatever reason, this company decided to spend a whole bunch of money promoting the heck out of Imagination, and I don't think it ever really went anywhere. I think there was a lot of companies, because of the Pokemon craze, that were trying to do their own Pokemon. 3DO comes to mind again, Trip Hawkins and his Cubics. That went nowhere. You have Digimon, those were kind of popular, Monster Rancher, Monster Farmer. You have other franchises too that were Pokemon-esque, but nothing to the same degree as Pokemon, and certainly not Imagination. But for whatever reason, you will see that a lot in this year of Nintendo Power Magazine. On the back end of that centerfold is they are keeping the tradition that they kept with last year in the year 2000, where the centerfold, the back of the centerfold was either tips or something else in regards to the game that was on the front cover, or on the centerfold. So the poster part was also the same game that was on the back of the poster, whether it be tips or whatever. They get a little bit more creative this year in what they put on the back of the posters too, as you'll see as we go through. But they're basically, mainly tips or extras that have something to do with what's on the front centerfold. So this is Might and Magic. I can't really tell if there is an interview here. I noticed as I was going through these that there was a lot of real and fake interviews, and you'll see that later as I go through the rest of these volumes. So on the other side of the Imagination fold out is an advertisement. Again, they were going to push cards. They were going to push the game. I don't know if there was ever a cartoon planned or whatever, but they certainly were pushing this thing. So also continuing on from last year, we have the gold version and silver version of Pokemon episode 3, which is basically season 2 of the Pokemon cartoon, but they turned it into comic book form, taking lines and story and pictures from the anime. In the middle of these, they always had these little Pokemon things. This is a taste test for the cereal and for the Pop-Tarts back then. So that was pretty crazy. Pokemon still was huge and still is huge today. It's the biggest franchise there is. I know I've talked about that in previous videos, but let's continue on. Also, behind that comic book, I had to cut this out today in order to take a picture of this. This is the first time I cut this out. It was perforated, but it was really hard to get out because I guess the perforation had just stuck. And plus, as you can see, there's a little bit of like damp water damage here. Still collectible, still in good shape. You can still tell what it is. And the Pokemon are kind of out of order, as you can see. But I think it was to kind of like give more precedence to the second gen Johto region gold and silver Pokemon. But this is like a Pokédex. And also to, for instance, they had, let's see here, they would have Magby, which was the baby of Magmar. And they had Smoochum, which was the baby of Jinx, and Elekid, which was the baby of Electabuzz, and so on and so forth. So they put them next to each other, which, is kind of cool. But it's not like it is an official Pokédex for Nintendo Power Magazine, that is, but it's not like, the numbers are by the Pokemon's names, but they're not in the right order. But blah, blah, blah. At the end of this, since this was the bonus volume, or bonus issue for the year, the January issue, they had the cover boy there, Spider-Man, and it was also to promote NintendoPower.com. So you had stickers promoting NintendoPower.com, and also there was, when you went to NintendoPower.com/spider, you could take out this decoder thing and hold it up to the screen, I guess. And it was supposed to decode a message on that web page. I did not check to see if this web page is still active. Probably not. But, it'd be fun to look at. Maybe you could look it up yourself after you watch this video. But, yeah, these are stickers of Spider-Man. The Spider-Man craze was huge. You got the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. The game was already a hit on PlayStation, and then they were bringing it over to Nintendo 64. And later on, they would bring other editions of it to, other Nintendo platforms, and, going on till these days. But yeah, there you go. And after that, you have the subscriber bonus. Usually I don't take a picture of the back of this, but this is where it was perforated, as you can see. You had to tear this out. It was a little booklet, and it was a subscriber bonus showing off, future things, like it says, looking forward. Game Boy Advance launched before the GameCube, even though they were announced basically the same time at Space World and at E3 of the, months leading up to this. And I'm going to write a history of, from my perspective, from a fan's perspective, of Nintendo going into this, so that you can have a little bit more reasoning as to why they did certain things. It would have made more sense for them to launch, since they announced them both at the same time, to launch them both at the same time, but they had a staggered release for GameCube, and there was also a lot of inner turmoil between Japan and America on whether the GameCube was even going to come out here in America, and whether they were just going to push mainly Game Boy Advance. They even had Game Boy Advance themed Nintendo Power Advance magazines that were like a supplement. I'm not going to be covering those in this video, but in the future, after I'm done doing all the years, I'm going to go back through the history of other supplemental material that Nintendo Power released, either the catalogs themselves, the items in the catalogs, extra stuff that was Nintendo Power related, but not really like a part of the subscription or anything like that. It was just extras that you had to get or be lucky enough to collect over the years. And, you know, supplemental magazines like the extra bonus issues, poster issues. Once Future Publishing took over, they had, it seemed like every other month they were releasing a new either poster issue or special issue or something like that. I'm going to cover all those in future videos, so stay tuned for that. But there's the subscriber bonus. Now we're on to February, and this is volume 141. Paper Mario's on the cover, and there's my little sticker there. Pokemon Stadium 2. This is also another time in history for Nintendo where Pokemon was so big that eventually they would split up into two different companies. Nintendo Co. Limited, which is NCL, Nintendo of Japan, and the Pokemon Company. Two separate companies. But, you know, Nintendo owns a controlling stake of the Pokemon Company, so it's still Nintendo's, but it's a separate company. They do their own thing, their own way, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Which, you know, gets into the whole history of why Nintendo ended up going into making cell phone games and blah, blah, blah. But that's, again, that's a tangent that I don't want to go on in this video. But this was around the time when things started, I don't want to say a wedge between the two. There isn't. But there was definitely some things going on company-wide that would trickle down into Nintendo Power Magazine. You'll notice that the bonuses are a lot less. There's a lot less extras. They shifted away from calling it the Super Power Club and Super Power Supplies Catalog to just calling it Power Supplies Catalog or just Power Catalog or whatever. And they did away with the whole subscriber. There were subscriber bonuses, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot less of them going into this year and in you know, subsequent years after this. So, but this is the centerfold, and on the back of the centerfold, like I was saying, these are tips for Pokemon Stadium 2. This is cool right here. This was a special Pokemon Game Boy Color. The cheek there of Pikachu lights up when you have that's the battery light. And it's gold because, you know, kind of signifies when silver and gold had come out. This is the gold and silver version, episode 4 of the Pokemon anime cartoon, like I was talking about, in comic book form. And on the back cover, you got that Imagination again. Here's the inside back cover front, and then this is the back cover all the way opened up with Imagination on the inside there. That's crazy. They pushed this game so much. And where did it go? I don't know. And then the cover boy for Pokemon Stadium 2, you got the beasts from Gen 2, Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, Pokemon Stadium 2. The centerfold for this was originally planned as a Capcom trilogy, although not like trilogy as in 1, 2, 3, but like a 3 editions of the game that would come out at the same time that would intermingle with each other. Basically, kind of like Pokemon, where you could only get all the Pokemon if you had both versions of the game. It was going to be similar to this. You couldn't get all of the things in the games unless you got all 3 of them. Well, they had to bump it down to 2, and the first one that was officially kind of like announced was Oracle of Seasons, but there was also Oracle of Ages, which they launched around the same time. One was more red themed and one was more blue themed, and you'll see that later on. There's a rumor going around right now that they're going to remake that in the style that they remade Link's Awakening, which, you know, that'd be cool. These were Game Boy Color exclusive games. They could not be played on the original Game Boy, unlike the DX edition of Link's Awakening and the regular gray cartridge edition of Link's Awakening that could be played on both Game Boy and Game Boy Color. They just had better features, especially the DX one for Game Boy Color. And on the back of that, you have a hero for all seasons. They talk about the seasons, Oracle of Seasons, because that's what that one was. And then in the Pokemon section of the magazine, you also have episode 5 of the gold and silver version. They call it gold and silver version. They were really pushing that. But it's basically Johto Journeys, the anime for the second season, which encompasses the second generation of Pokemon. And then again, the back cover has Magination on there, and also this weird advertisement for a Disney Channel movie. Ugh, goodness, that's weird. Okay, here we have some alternate covers. Now, I don't know officially which ones would be considered first, second, and third. They were released at the same time. They were like this on the newsstand. They were like this with subscribers. I think that they were equal. I think it was like 33% of each. So it wasn't like one was more rare than the other, like alternate covers from the past. But here is, I believe this was the more official color, Glacier, which is a see-through purple, and then Indigo, which was solid purple, and also sort of the official color of Gamecube, and Arctic, which is the white one. That's the one that I chose. And then here's all three of them together. The covers don't match, or I mean, they're all the same cover, but they don't like form a puzzle to make a bigger cover or anything like that. They're just different colored Game Boy Advances. So alternate covers, if you want to get them, if you've seen them before and you're like, what, I don't remember this color, you know, well, there's the solid purple, see-through purple, and white. And the center of that volume, which is volume 143, April of 2001, you have Mario Party 3, and then on the back there, I didn't catch this at first until I opened this up all the way. This is an actual like paper board game, because as you can see, here's pieces that you can cut out with scissors. It's got like cut along the lines dots there. And yeah, you can fold them into like little players to play on a field like Monopoly or something like that, to collect stars like you would in Mario Party 3. I guess this was for people who couldn't afford the game, so they just had a cutout game. I don't know. They've had cutout games before in Nintendo Power Magazine. I thought this was tips at first, but then when I folded it out, I'm like, oh, this is cutout lines. This is meant to be like a paper game people could cut out and do. And again, here we have the Pokemon section, which shows this is the last Pokemon comic that they released. This is not the last of the gold and silver cartoon anime. No, it's not. It's just this was the last time that they decided to put this in Nintendo Power Magazine. It was probably costing them extra. It was attached to the center of it. It's a comic book, but it wasn't like a pull-out one or a separate one that was packed in. They tried to have everything attached to binding as much as possible so that it would never have to bag the magazines, which I guess back then that was a big deal. But, you know, they did that on purpose so that, you know, it would be all attached so that, you know, you wouldn't have to, again, bag it or whatever. So that was the last one that they did of that. And as you'll see, going forward, they get rid of more and more stuff. I'm not saying that they were being cheap or chintzy, but they were obviously cutting costs. The company was a little bit hurting in the sense of they had dominance through the NES era. They were pretty well off in the Super NES era, but the Nintendo 64 era, especially in Japan and America, and well, all worldwide really, PlayStation was dominating them, and so they were cutting costs here and there in their promotional and advertisement and stuff, because, you know, I don't know if they were saving up for Game Boy Advance and GameCube, but even then it could be argued, which, you know, I'll get into once I make my history page on my blog or Blogger. That's again, that's a future tangent that we'll talk about. They officially finally said, okay, this is what it is. It's going to be the Oracle of Ages and the Oracle of Seasons. And that's the cover for Nintendo Power Magazine. You'll notice, too, when they add up in the upper left-hand corner, Game Boy Advance, and they still have Nintendo 64, but they don't have GameCube yet. That's another thing to talk about. But this volume is where they start. You see how there's gold, their normal red trim with the yellow, traditional Nintendo Power Magazine. The binding still has that logo, but the front covers from here on, at least in this year, were black borders and plain white, or some other plain solid color. So as you can see, the covers there, plain white, black and white. So in volume 144 of May 2001, we have Dragon Warrior 3, or Dragon Quest, centerfold. And on the back of this is kind of cool, they have an interview with Yuji Horii, who is the co-creator, or some would say the main creator, of the Dragon Quest Dragon Warrior series. And, you know, the art, if you don't know, Dragon Ball Fair, and other dragon things that in Japan, there's, you know, there's a series that was on Xbox. I can't remember the name of it, but or not a series, but it was just one game, but there was 4 discs to it, blah blah blah. That was done by Akira Toriyama, so cool little fun little thing there. As you can see, they switch. I've been talking about they're reducing stuff in Nintendo Power Magazine. They're slowly moving away from the Super Power Supplies catalog and just calling it Power Supplies. This is just a card. I'm showing only the front and the back of it because that's all it is. It's just a card that was inserted into this magazine. They're soon to do away with this traditional catalog that would sometimes come 4 or 5 times a year. Now is being reduced to, you know, a card, or twice a year or something like that. So, but there's that card that was inserted in this volume. And then the next volume, this was around the time when they released the Nintendo Power Advance magazine. And they have GameCube up in the corner finally, and Nintendo 64 is off of there, but Game Boy Advance is still their main thing at this time. There was, I don't know if I've already talked about this in this video, but I will be talking about it when I talk about the Nintendo Power Advance magazine supplement, that Yamauchi, who was the president of Nintendo at the time, he was the family president, he had stated to the effect that, you know, Game Boy Advance will launch in North America, but they're not certain if they're going to release GameCube in America. And at this time, that's why Nintendo Power Magazine was probably, and Nintendo of America was probably cutting back on GameCube promotion, because they I don't know if this was an empty threat or if this was him just, you know, flexing or something like that. But there was rumors going around that, you know, it was actually serious, that like there weren't enough components, or they spent too much money on it, and they didn't want to lose, and blah blah blah, and all this other stuff, and that they were just going to focus on Game Boy Advance and the rest of the world. But you know, we know that didn't happen. They did release the GameCube worldwide, but he had said at one point publicly that they may not even release the GameCube worldwide. So blah blah blah. So they, again, like I was saying, they were focusing on Game Boy Advance especially. But GameCube was at E3 that year, and this is June of 2001. This is volume 145, and you got Super Mario Advance, which is actually Super Mario Brothers 2 USA. It was the first Advance game. The second Advance game was Super Mario World, which is over in Japan. It's called Super Mario Brothers 4, and then the third one, I believe, was Yoshi's Island, which was Super Mario World 2, and then the fourth Advance is the best, obviously, for most people, Super Mario Brothers 3, but it's Super Mario Advance 4, so it's it's confusing. In case you didn't know, they probably didn't do 1 on Game Boy Advance first because they had already redid Super Mario Brothers, the first one, as DX on Game Boy Color. But that's a whole other thing. This is Super Mario Advance, which is basically Super Mario Brothers 2. The centerfold for this volume is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, but when you look at the back of this, you realize, oh, this is for the Game Boy Advance one. So, again, they're Spyro, Crash, games that were PlayStation staples, again, coming over to Game Boy Advance first, and then eventually coming to GameCube, but still did not really change much. The PlayStation 2 just dominated seemingly even more than the PlayStation 1 did in America. But, you know, that's going to be for my history video on, I don't know if you want to call it console wars, or I say video, but it's going to be a really long, over time, basically a history of Nintendo from my perspective, in console gaming, that is, and portable games too, gaming in general, I guess I should say. But you know, that'll be a separate blog post, and I'll probably do videos on that too. So I don't want to go off on too much tangents here, but it did affect and trickle down to the company, to Nintendo of America, to Nintendo Power Magazine. And here they're pushing the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 Game Boy Advance game. So, but here's the 64 game. But I do believe that this also released on GameCube, maybe, but definitely on Game Boy Advance and on 64. I think all the first 3 Tony Hawk games, just like on PlayStation, they were also on Nintendo 64. This doesn't say anything about GameCube. GameCube did get a Tony Hawk Pro Skater, but I don't know which ones later on. I was not like a huge Pro Skater fan, but you know, it's still interesting because it was a big part of gaming in that time. So we are now in July 2001. Here's another one that originally was a Nintendo franchise, Street Fighter, but then went over to PlayStation, and Nintendo, of course, was pushing and touting it back on Nintendo platforms with Turbo Revival Super Street Fighter 2. This is the centerfold for that. I like the artwork for this too. It's really nice. And on the back of that, there's character profiles. So, and some tips there. And in this is one of the last, to my knowledge, Superpower Supplies catalog. And as you can see, they've dropped the Super name and Superpower Club in general. This is summer 2001. But when you go to open it, it's only a couple of pages. It's not like, I mean, it's a bigger catalog than previous ones, but there's a lot less items, and it's smaller, and they're obviously doing away with this. Next volume is volume 147. It's Pokemon Crystal, which this was the Game Boy Color exclusive. The Game Boy Advance was coming out, and here finally there was an exclusive Game Boy Color Pokemon game. But worked on Game Boy Advance as well, but it didn't work on the original Game Boy. But the color one had Suicune as the cover boy there, so that's a Crystal version. And that is for, again, August 2001, volume 147. Here's another PlayStation first franchise, although you could argue it's been on other or was planned for other platforms too, like Saturn and 3DO, but PlayStation was where it got big. Tomb Raider, Lara Croft. This one is I think a Game Boy Color version of the game. Anyways, and then here's Game Boy Advance cover for Mario Kart Super Circuit, and that is volume 148, which is September 2001. And like I was saying before, there's jokes here. This is NHL Hits, which Midway had a strong relationship with Nintendo since before the Ultra, or should I say Nintendo 64 came out, with Killer Instinct and the Cruisin' games and a bunch of other games that ported over to Nintendo 64 fairly well because of Midway's arcade partnership with Nintendo. On the back of this, it says Dwayne Gretzky. There they have an interview with Dwayne Gretzky, not Wayne Gretzky, but Dwayne. But Hits was like kind of like Blitz, but NHL. So there was NFL Blitz, which was like a very arcadey, over the top football game, and then this was an arcadey, over the top hockey game. So I'm trying to remember. I may have to edit this video in the future. I'm pretty sure, because I didn't have it written in my notes, but there was stickers for one of the Rogue Squadron games for Star Wars. Now this game, when it came out, it looks so great. I mean, even to this day, you could argue that it looks very good. It is Star Wars Rogue Leader, which is Rogue Squadron 2. The first one was on Nintendo 64, and this one was even more spectacular on the GameCube. The visuals and the gameplay and everything, it was just great. Factor 5 did an amazing job on this game, and it's sad that they fell by the wayside over history, but they were good at taking certain technologies and just really cranking the heck out of them. But there was a set of stickers, and I want to say that it was a Nintendo Power promotional thing. I don't know if it was something that came in the magazine. I don't know if I've already covered it in a previous video. I'll have to look again here. In fact, let me look again in my notes again, even though I looked in this earlier. I'm going to go Control Find and look for Rogue. Yeah, so it was in volume 115. So this was in the past. They had Rogue Squadron stickers that were an added thing for Nintendo Power Magazine. So yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking that it was either something else that you had to get through Nintendo Power Magazine, or it was something that came with the game when you bought it, blah, blah, blah. Yes, it was Nintendo Power Magazine, but I was thinking about the previous game, and it was in the magazine. You didn't have to buy the game to get it. Here's Spyro, again, another PlayStation staple. Season of Ice, there was a bunch of Game Boy Advance games that came over that were Spyro, bunch of Castlevania, bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh!, bunch of Crash Bandicoot games, all on Game Boy Advance. It wasn't just one or two of each franchise, it was multiples of each of those franchises. And on the back of this, they have an interview with Spyro himself. So that's the joke interviews again, so it's kind of funny. And here we go. This is when GameCube finally launches. It's here. I like how this cover and the cover of the next volume, they really push it's a hit. They have that big bold letters on the bottom of the magazine, and they show the GameCube in the background here. This is Luigi's Mansion on the front cover, and the centerfold was Super Smash Bros. Melee, which that was a phenomenon in itself, and it shows how to use the GameCube controller to play Smash Brothers now, and it has character profiles here on the back of the centerfold. And also, I believe this is the last one, officially, the winter catalog for 2001 of Power Supplies, which is the Super Power Supplies catalog. And you'll see a gaming chair there. It's like a blow-up one, and an armoire. This was some crazy, goofy stuff. This was before gaming chairs became a thing, but they're showing the GameCube and all these extras and stuff that are related to that. And in this magazine, there was a bag put with it, and it says free inside a PC demo disc with a K. That's spelled wrong. It should be a C. And it says preview CD-ROM, not DVD. You got to remember, this is early 2000s. DVD still wasn't a thing. Also, this was a mini disc. So when you open this up, it's like the GameCube top lid, and then you pull it out, and it's the size of a GameCube disc. So really, even if it was a DVD, you wouldn't probably want to play it. I mean, it probably would be okay in the tray of a DVD player, but a lot of people would probably feel uncertain about sticking in a smaller 3cm disc, or is it 3 centimeters? Or 3-inch, I should say, disc, as opposed to the full-size CD or DVD 5-inch disc. Regardless, this was one of those extras that they gave to Nintendo Power Magazine, whether you're a subscriber or you got it from the newsstand, I believe, because all of these were in a bag. They were also sent to people individually. I still have my sealed one sent to me individually. They had a barcode on the back of them, so they were in store kiosks too. And it's the bottom of the GameCube, which is really clever the way they advertise this. This is really cool. Now, a lot of people argued and whined up and down that, oh, it's a mini disc, you can hold less data. Nintendo shot themselves in the foot again. Again, get into the history of that once I do that blog post someday. Well, it's not going to be just one post. It's going to be one page, but I'm going to have to be posting at it over and over again because there's a lot of history to go over there. But this I thought was a cool little promotional item, and this was a QuickTime thing. Had probably preview videos and movies. I'm going to cover this in a future video and on the blog for the Nintendo Power checklist to talk about all the extra supplemental material that Nintendo Power Magazine gave and what the contents of some of those discs were, whether they be soundtracks or preview DVDs or something like this, a CD-ROM. So it seems almost kind of primitive, a CD-ROM? What about a DVD, preview disc or whatever? But yeah, you got to think of the times, and you got to probably think Nintendo didn't want to say anything about DVD because PlayStation 2 had already launched at this point, and it was probably at the time the cheapest DVD player that most people could get, which helped push the PlayStation 2 into the stratosphere when it first launched anyway, because it could also play DVDs. The launch games for PlayStation 2 sucked, if I'm going to be honest and be fanboyish here. So, you had basically the best launch software title probably for the PlayStation 2 was The Matrix, the movie. So, but anyways, that's all beside the point. By the time GameCube had come out, Grand Theft Auto 3 had already come out, and that was the real killer app for PlayStation 2, and yada yada yada. That's again a piece of history we'll talk about in the future. And here is volume 151, which is December 2001. So we're done with the year 2001, and you'll notice there wasn't a lot of extras in these volumes, as I was saying before, and I'm going to cover that more on the blog and when I go over the supplemental stuff and the history of Nintendo and in my blogger and in videos in the future about probably why this had happened. They were cutting back on Super Power Supply's catalog. They were cutting back on the Super Power Club in general. They were cutting back on a bunch of extras, the comics, the cards, everything, because this was a trying time for the company around this time. But this is the front cover, which is Super Smash Bros. Melee, and man, a lot of people would argue that was the only game to play on the GameCube at the time. So I disagree with that, but I could see why a lot of people will say that, and it is an amazing game. Still to this day, they play tournaments for it and everything. So, Vengeance, Batman Vengeance, the centerfold, and on the back of that is some tips for Batman Vengeance, and that's it. That's the last picture. That is the last volume for 2001. In my next video, I'll be going over the year 2002, where GameCube starts to hit more of a stride. But the effects of the PlayStation 2 monster, and to a much lesser degree than people would have you believe, the Xbox was, putting the hurt on Nintendo there for a while. But Game Boy Advance and Pokemon, again, were stepping up to fill in the blanks of some of the things that, that either GameCube was lacking or Nintendo as a company was lacking in comparison to the competition. And it was a setup for the revolution, which you'll see in the future, which ended up being the Nintendo Wii, which is a phenomenon all its own. That's all history, and that's all knowledge to give forth in these Nintendo Power checklists. So keep checking back with these videos, and thanks for watching.